sweet loves, welcome to the Heroines Path podcast, a sacred space for awakening women wishing to transcend limitations, blaze their own trail, and return to divine wholeness. I'm Cece, healing priestess, transformation mentor, and spiritual coach, and I'll be your guide as we go on this quest of reclamation, activation, and ascension. Together we'll dive into heart-centered wisdom, mystical stories, illuminating tools, and masculine-feminine dynamics across the areas of life, love, and business. See this podcast as part of a soulful new pilgrimage, a journey to meet your highest self. Remember, you're a self-leading queen, and no one knows you better than you, so receive what your soul needs and leave the rest. Heroine, it's time to forget who you've been taught to be and become all that you were born to be. Let's take one another by the hand. Together, we rise. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to another Juicy AF episode. You are going to absolutely love what I have to share with you today. I just know you're going to find this episode so interesting. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to say that this episode is #spawn, #sponsored by my brand new bundle, The Feminine Alchemist. The Feminine Alchemist is a beautiful and healing collection of 7 powerful rituals centered around feminine archetypes. And those archetypes are the Priestess, the Lover, the Warrioress, the Child, the Wise Woman, the Wild Woman, and the Queen. And these are all archetypes that exist within you. These rituals range from 20 minutes to an hour. And they are so powerful. I've been doing them myself and they have been so healing and so life-changing for me. I honestly wish that I had known more about embodiment work when I first started leaning into self-love and healing and growth, because awakening the sacred feminine, the divine feminine within, this simply cannot exist only as a theory or as a concept in your mind. You can't find out about it from just books or just podcasts like this one or others that you listen to, or reading Instagram posts. You can't just learn about it intellectually. She needs to be felt in your body, in your heart, and in your soul. It needs to be moved, breathed, orgasmed, cried, howled into being. The frequencies of feminine energy are pleasure, power, and heart-led, loving purpose. But if you can't really feel these in your body, if you don't feel safe to expand, then life isn't going to change that much. So the invitation now is to head to my website, www.coachbycc.com/the-feminine-alchemist, or go to my Instagram @coachbycc. Check out the link in my bio. The Feminine Alchemist launches today. It's the 24th of August. So if you're listening to this and it's after that date, then head there now. It will be available to you at just $333. You get lifetime access to the rituals and the integration work that goes alongside. There's also a Juicy AF bonus workshop in there for you, all about mastering masculine and feminine energetics. And that's 2 hours long as well. So much amazing content in there, such an abundant price. Head there right now, or once you've listened to this episode, of course. And I cannot wait to see so many of you jumping into that bundle. I just know you're going to absolutely love it. Amazing. On with today's show. We are talking about the feminine archetypes. And I want to give you a bit of an overview of what archetypes are, keeping it super simple, super easy to understand and digest. And then I want to run through those archetypes that I mentioned, the 7 that I've included in the Feminine Alchemist. Now, they do differ slightly from Carl Jung's kind of standard list of 7 archetypes. but I wanted to go through the ones that I feel super drawn to and that I work with, because of course that is where my passions lie. And I think it's slightly interesting to just deviate from the norm ever so slightly and include the ones that have meant something personal to me, rather than just reading off a standard list, because that's not how we roll around here. So if you are unfamiliar with archetypes and what they actually are and what that actually means, how many more times can I say actually? What they are, what they mean, what even is an archetype? The way I see it, archetypes are like distillations of a specific energy. So all of the universe is energy. Everything is energy. You are energy. I am energy. Everything that you see is energy, right? And there are so many different branches or strands or versions of energy, even within the feminine, even within you. There are, I'm sure, a million different personalities in one. You have good days, you have bad days, you have angry days, you have super happy days, days where you feel so aligned, days where you feel like you want to go out and talk to everybody. And then you have days where you're super introverted and you just want to be in your room or stay in bed and watch movies. You know, there are so many different facets and versions of your being. And there are so many different facets and versions of the feminine energy, all the way through from pure destructive chaos to quiet and tender and soft and nurturing. So, of course, all of that energy exists within you too. But the interesting thing about archetypes and what's useful about them, and also quite humbling to know as well, is that archetypal energy exists whether or not you do. That's the difference between an archetype and an archetypal energy and something that is your personality. If you cease to exist, then your personality would cease to exist, other than it in memory and it being felt by the people that knew you. But on a global scale, your personality would cease to exist. Your soul lives forever. Your soul will continue because your soul returns to source, just pure and unconditional love, but your personality ceases to exist. Now, with archetypes, if you cease to exist, those archetypes live on forever. They exist both within you and without you, as above, so below. And so when we think about archetypes, we can work with them in the sense that these are energies that are flowing through our bodies, flowing through our soul, but also energies that we can tap into collectively as well, and energies that you're going to be able to start recognizing in other people. And so it's interesting and always really helpful to, I think this is why oftentimes we place goddess figures, gods even, different kind of characters, faces, costumes, items. We associate them with the archetypes because it helps us to capture and call to mind what that energy is. So if we can think of a super famous goddess, somebody that you will all have heard of is like Aphrodite, goddess of love, ancient Greek goddess of love and beauty and sexual energy. Now, you've all heard of Aphrodite. She's a cultural icon. Everybody knows who that is. And when you think about Aphrodite, you think of beauty, you think of plump lips, you think of curves, you think of flowing white robes, golden hair, maybe even the golden apple, if you're familiar with the myth about Paris choosing who is the most powerful goddess out of Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite. Wisdom, power, and beauty, and he chose Aphrodite. So you may even associate her with a golden apple. You might associate her with the myth of Troy, or even the movie with Brad Pitt, because hello. And you know, so it's these archetypes, these goddesses that it instantly calls to mind. And if I said to you, you know, embody Aphrodite, you might find your body starts to move and your shoulders drop, and maybe you pat your lips out, or you give like a coquettish gaze across the room, or, you know, maybe you flick your hair, or you do something that makes you feel sexy. And that is the power of archetypes, right? It's like they are so accessible and they help us to change and adapt who we are in the now. So when we think about archetypes, the way that I approach them is like calling them forward from within and also like asking their guidance from without, because there will be so many different archetypes that exist within you, but it's up to you to decide who you want to have a relationship with, who you feel most drawn to. And that comes from just tuning into your intuition, feeling into your body, which words feel most attractive to you, which energies feel like they're going to be most helpful for you. And it's really up to you to decide, like, who do you want to embody? Because that really is where you can take this, is like, who do I desire to be? Who do I desire to embody? And when you ask yourself that question, that's when you can really start to have fun and start to play with the archetypes that are going to be most exciting and juicy and beneficial to where you see yourself going. And that's why we're all here, right? So that we can blaze our own trail, so that we can return to divine wholeness, so that we can reclaim our power as feminine beings, so that we can rise both individually and collectively, and so that we can embody goddess energy for ourselves, in our relationships, at work, and for the world, because that's what the world needs. We need to rebalance the world so that we can live in harmony and try to rescue our planet. So let's dive into the 7 archetypes that I've chosen as part of the Feminine Alchemist bundle. To be honest, actually, it's going to be 8 archetypes, because even the Feminine Alchemist in and of itself is an archetype that I have kind of conjured up. I often just create archetypes myself. Anybody that's familiar with my work knows that I just like to make archetypes up, because that to me is such an accessible way for people to understand what I'm talking about, because it's almost a bit like a stereotype. Okay, like I could talk to you about a stereotypical behavior, a stereotypical type of person, and immediately you're like, yeah, I know who you're talking about, I know that person. You're already conjuring to mind somebody who reminds you of that person I've described. And archetypes are no different. It's just archetypes live in our unconscious. They live in this almost shared pool of knowledge and memories and wisdom that all humans have access to, because deep down and on a sort of a psychological level, we are all connected, and a soul level too. We're all connected. We're all kind of related if you think about it. So, of course, humans do have these shared instinctual patterns of behavior. And that's what's so interesting to me. And that's why I chose to do anthropology at university, because I'm fascinated by the fact that humans who have never had any contact with each other, humans from across the world, will often display very, very similar instinctual patterns of behavior when it comes to worshipping the gods so that they have a positive and bountiful harvest that year, or thinking that there are little spirits that live in the local river, or having rituals and rites of passage to mark a woman when she gets her period, or to take a boy from boyhood to manhood. These are shared collective experiences. When you think about all of the huge, beautiful, most sacred sites on our planet, they are all, other than skyscrapers, which are built to the new religion of wealth and capitalism, you have all of the ancient sites were all faith-based, all sacred sites. Why do humans feel so drawn to building these mementos on the planet that represent their idea of capturing goddess or god consciousness? And I just find that so interesting. And I was actually having a conversation the other day with my brother and my dad about how I just can't even comprehend, like, the people who built cathedrals and temples when they took hundreds, sometimes even almost 1,000 years to get these buildings to where they are as we see them today. Imagine building something that you know in your lifetime you're never going to be able to step foot inside and see the finished article. You're never going to be actually able to worship at the temple that you're helping to build, but you're giving your life in service of something greater. And I just find that fascinating. Anyway, side topic, back to feminine archetypes. And we're going to roll through the 8 feminine archetypes that I am vibing with and feeling into as I launch the feminine, if I can get my words out, the Feminine Alchemist. Oh my God, I literally cannot speak. The Feminine Alchemist bundle, 7 rituals, 7 temples, 7 days. Let's go. You don't actually have to do them all in 7 days, but that is kind of the invitation if you'd like to. So let's start with the Feminine Alchemist. Why have I called this bundle the Feminine Alchemist? What does that even mean in your life? What would it mean if you were a feminine alchemist? So the way I see it is the Feminine Alchemist is a woman who turns her wounds into wisdom, who asks herself every single day whether things go wrong, in inverted commas, or whether things go right, in inverted commas, because everything is just experience. She asks herself every single day, how can I let this serve me? What's here for me? What are the lessons here? She turns her wounds into wisdom. She takes everything that's happened to her and she decides to use that as fuel for her evolution and for her growth. The Feminine Alchemist is a woman that embraces the rapture of her emotional waves. Embraces the rapture of her emotional waves. And what I mean by that is when she feels an emotion rising within her, she lets it flow and she feels it to its fullness. She allows it to vibrate through her being. She allows it to wash over her. And she feels it to its depth, knowing and feeling always anchored and safe in the knowledge that it will pass and that she is not her emotions. She is the witness of her emotions and that they come bearing beautiful and sacred messages for her. So if she feels angry, she knows that she's out of integrity or that she needs to set a boundary somewhere. And if she feels sad, she knows that it's an opportunity and an invitation to spiral upwards and to invite more joy and more play and maybe more rest into her life. And if she feels joyful and happy, then she sees that as an indication that she's in alignment and that she's following her path and that life is responding to what she is putting out there. And finally, the Feminine Alchemist, the woman who is an embodied feminine alchemist, knows that her body is both the vessel for her own magic and also the medicine that the world needs. And so you can see why I find this archetype really beautifully healing and encouraging to relate to, because the work I do is really about taking my life experiences, learning from them, embodying the lessons, and then packaging it up in a way that helps other women to journey along their own paths. I see myself as a way shower, as someone who goes first, as someone who is really embodying what I've just described, turning my wounds into wisdom and embracing the rapture of my emotional waves so that my body becomes my vessel for my magic, like my voice is my medicine. That's why having this podcast is so powerful for me. And that's why I often do video content, because I feel that my voice is my superpower and that when I speak, it just explains and lands things into the souls of the women who need to hear it so clearly and so effectively. So she knows, the Feminine Alchemist knows that her body is her magic and that all the answers are there. She's deeply connected to her intuition and to her cycles. And she also knows that by offering her gifts, that her unique gifts that come from within, that is the medicine that the world needs, whatever form that might take, whether you do something similar to me or you desire to, or whether you are an artist, or whether you're a singer, or whether you're a builder or a painter, or whether you're incredible at giving speeches, or whether you make jewelry, you know, whatever your gift is, know that that is the medicine that the world needs. Okay, so that is the feminine alchemist. And now we move on to the 7 archetypes that I've chosen to build these rituals around. And I would love to hear from you after this episode, which archetype feels most resonant for you, which one you were most drawn to, and which one you want to invite more of into your life. I've chosen just archetypal names rather than specific goddesses because I wanted to keep this at just a level of energy and what that energy looks like rather than following a specific goddess and her story, even though she may be a representation of this archetype. It's also really important to recognize that some of these archetypes overlap. So for example, with the wild woman archetype, she is like the instinctual, primal, feminine energy. And so when it comes to like the lover, the priestess, the wise woman, like all of those are encapsulated in wild woman as well. And all of these are derivatives of feminine energy. But trying to tackle the whole of feminine energy, like feminine energy in its entirety in one ritual or one description, would be an impossible task, because the feminine is everything. She's everything. So this is why it's helpful for us to dissect her a little bit and put her in 2 boxes, because we are humans and we like to define things and we like to categorize things, and it's okay to lean into that. That's what we're doing with these archetypes. So the first is the priestess. Now, I've been on a bit of a journey with this word because I didn't feel that I could claim this word about myself for such a long time. I was nervous because I didn't want to be seen as culturally appropriating anything. As a white woman who is heterosexual and comes from a middle-class family, you know, I'm very aware of my privilege. I'm very aware that I do not come from an indigenous community. And so I was kind of nervous to embrace the word priestess. But as I looked into more and more what a priestess is and what she devotes her life in service to, I felt a draw more and more to really claim this word for myself. And ever since I have, it's resulted in such a quantum shift, such a leap for the way that I approach my work, the way that I show up in the world, and really what I've brought forward as my offerings and as my gifts. So the priestess, the way I see her is she is here to hold space for transformation on this planet. Like I've said, similar to the feminine alchemist, the priestess knows that her body is the vessel for her magic and also the medicine that the world needs. So she spends a lot of time grounding, anchoring in safety, and really going beyond the veil and meditating to bring back information, bring back knowledge and wisdom that will help the transformation of this planet. Like I've mentioned, the priestess is kind of a hidden and long forgotten archetype in our culture specifically. The goddess and the priestess are archetypes that are rising again, and feminine energy is in such desperate need of the priestesses to rise and claim their space in this world. And they are arriving one by one. You may even feel drawn to this archetype yourself. You may even feel when I say the word priestess, that something is awakening and remembering within you. And the priestess is here to recode our planet with truth, with feminine knowledge, and with love. What I love about the priestess archetype is that she embodies the marriage of opposites. She marries together the masculine and the feminine. She marries together the physical and the spiritual. She knows deeply that her intuition is her superpower, and her shadow and the thing that she needs to overcome is being afraid of the dark, being afraid of her own power, being nervous to go beyond the veil and to receive the wisdom that's there for her because she's scared that she won't come back. So this archetype is, when I close my eyes and think about her, she's deeply, deeply powerful. She's in sort of dark robes. There's dark red, the color is coming through, roses coming through. She's behind an altar, or even maybe in front of an altar. There's a fire. She's so powerful as an archetype, and so useful for us to connect to, because When we own the priestess within, when we recognize that that lineage has been lost, but that it needs to rise again, we can deeply connect to our own truth, to our voice, and to our gifts. And it's time for us to all reclaim our mystical ways, right? And our priestess power. So maybe that speaks to you in terms of the work you do, or you've always felt deeply spiritual, but you've repressed that part of yourself for fear of shame or judgment. You might even see people say, you know, fear of being burnt at the stake, because we do carry a lot of those wounds from the burning times when women and medicine women, priestesses, midwives even, were persecuted and executed for their connection to the divine feminine and to nature and to the world of wisdom and magic. The next archetype I've chosen is the lover. Now, this really is one of the core feminine archetypes, and I've touched on Aphrodite already, and that is such a atypical representation of lover archetypal energy. But when it comes to you and your life and what the lover means for you, she arrives to open us up and to let life and the universe, God, and our partner to deeply penetrate us and fill our life with so many blessings. But for us to be able to achieve this, for us to be able to be in this relationship with life, this polarized relationship where we are leading from our cracked open feminine heart, and we're open and we're ready to receive what life has to offer and what life wants to bestow onto us, we need to be cracked open. We need to be receptive. We need to be willing. We need to be deeply ready for everything that life wants to give us. And so many of us are still closed off from our own pleasure. We're still closed off from all the abundance that's in our life. We're still feeling and thinking and believing that we are unworthy of receiving. So the invitation here is to become our own best lover, to evolve into our highest self and become self-healing, self-leading, self-sourcing, getting everything we need from within so that we can feel safe enough to open, anchoring that safety from within. Every time we want to expand, every time we want to deepen our relationship with life, we need to return to this space in our body again and again and again, and really make sure that we're rooted and grounded in both our body and our heart, so that we can emerge with softness as the goddess within and ready to become life's best lover. So I want to know how that speaks to you. Does that, what that invokes within you? Because when I think about that, I think about almost like, I've talked about this on a live before, it reminds me of like Fleur Delacour from Harry Potter. I don't know if any of you are Harry Potter fans, but when she enters the Great Hall, when they arrive from their school, they have like this moment where they're like, ah, and then like all butterflies fly out from underneath their cloaks. And it just kind of reminds me of that, you know, taking a deep breath, letting our shoulders drop and just opening up to life. Letting life do some of the work, letting life court you, letting yourself be romanticized by life. And of course, when you let life romanticize you, when you let life date you, then you're opening yourself up to letting the people around you do the same. And that might not even necessarily be in romantic relationships. That might also be in your relationships with your clients and in business, you know. Let yourself receive without needing to give. So many of us feel that we have to give in order to receive. And it's just not the case. Okay, next archetype is the warrioress. You may sometimes hear this as the huntress. The warrioress is, I chose a warrior over huntress because hunt is very much indicative of like going after goals, like hunting, like shooting your bow and arrow and being on target. And that is definitely an archetype. But I've chosen warrioress because for me, the warrior is more grounded. And I think it's also beautiful to bring a little bit of that healthy masculine energy in, even though she's called the warrioress. for me, it invokes some of that beautiful, grounded, humble courage that you get from the masculine energy. So embodying the warrioress within requires us to rise from the flames and the ashes of all of our past pain and hurts and fears. And this takes courage, and this takes humility, and it takes the power of forgiveness. And often we can recognize that we need to forgive others, right? It's quite easy to get to the point where you're like, okay, like I know that I need to forgive that person because otherwise I'm going to be carrying around this pain and this hurt. And so, yeah, I get that. But it takes an even deeper strength and an even deeper level of consciousness to recognize that we need to forgive ourselves for all the time and all the precious energy that we've wasted focusing on that which holds us back. And so the warrioress arrives to help us ground in when everything feels like it's burning around us, when we've got pains and hurts and people that have wronged us and regrets maybe. The warrioress is the archetype that helps us to let that all go, but not from a space of just giving up and, and abandoning, from a space of deep humility and courage and bravery to step forward and say, no longer am I going to allow what's been holding me back to get in the way of me moving and evolving and growing into the highest version of myself. So I love that fierce love that comes from the warrioress. The next archetype is the child. Now, this is where I've deviated a little bit because the child, of course, isn't a feminine archetype. It's a universal archetype that is indicative of both, of all humans. We all have an inner child. And our inner child is nothing more and needs nothing more than unconditional love. And what gets in the way of our inner child knowing that they are unconditional love? Because they know when they first come into this world, right? You can see little children just know that they deserve to have all of their needs met. And they play and they have the most amazing imagination, and they are so connected to life and to nature and to themselves and their own emotions. What gets in the way is that we forget that we deserve to be seen. We forget that we're worthy. We forget that we're connected to all of life. We receive messages and experiences that send us running into the dark forest within and hiding and afraid to come out and move into or make the moves that we need to create the life that we desire, because we're afraid of being abandoned or receiving abuse or being rejected. And it leaves us feeling wounded and afraid to reach out and claim our fullest and highest potentials. And so what this means is that we end up with this big split within between our adult self and our child self. And our adult self has moved forward because time doesn't stop, but our child self, or maybe our young teenage self perhaps, is still stuck back there where they were, dealing with the same fears, needing to be liberated. So when you think about your inner child, does it conjure up feelings of love and joy and happiness? Or is that a painful place to go? Is it a place that feels tender and vulnerable and exposed? And if so, maybe it's time to liberate your inner child from the darkness. Maybe it's time to heal and call forward your inner child back into love, back into worthiness, back into connection with life. So let me know how that lands for you. And if you're feeling the call, then have a look into the Feminine Alchemist bundle, because that particular ritual is so deeply healing and nourishing, so powerful. It's also a walking ritual. So you put it on and then you go for a walk to your favorite place, maybe the park or the beach or up to your favorite rooftop. And it's just such a lovely way to get out and move through the world, letting yourself see the world with your inner child's eyes. So that one is particularly one of my favorites. Okay, next up we have Wise Woman. I actually did a full moon ritual for the August full moon in Aquarius, all about the wise woman archetype inside my membership, the Heroines Circle, which if you're feeling called to join is always in the show notes, or you can easily join from my website, coachbycc.com/the-heroines-circle, or the link in my bio on Instagram. But yeah, we did a beautiful full moon ritual all about the wise woman, because this is the archetype that has been shunned the most by our society. And when we think about wise women, we think about witches and old crones in Disney movies, and I'm here to say no more. When you step into my spaces, the wise woman in you, the part of you that's getting older, the part of you when you're on your period, the part of you that doesn't feel attractive, the part of you that feels introverted and doesn't want to go out into the world, but just wants to sit and marinate in her own wisdom and her own company. Here, that part of you is deeply celebrated and exalted for your embodied wisdom and your quiet counsel. This is the nurturing, loving mother or grandmother within. And when you embody wise woman, you are thoughtful, reflective, and you can soothe yourself all the way through and up and out of your emotional triggers. When you feel that fight or flight kick in, it's time to embody wise woman. And remember that question: what's here for me? How can I let this serve me? What is the deeper lesson here? And I just invite you now to even place a hand on your heart and just imagine no longer being controlled or at the mercy of your reactions, your emotional reactions, but being able to actually pause and take a breath and feel and move through it. Feels so good to reclaim that sovereignty. So that's wise woman. And we do some beautiful reparenting work inside that ritual. Next up, we have wild woman. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have either read or heard of the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Now, this is one of my favorite books because it combines my two loves, feminine awakening and Jungian psychology, with fairy tales and mythology. I mean, you literally couldn't get a more perfect book for me, for my vibe, everything I'm about. I literally love it. And the wild woman is, as she beautifully describes this archetype in that book, so absolutely recommend that. But the wild woman is the essential self. She's the instinctual self. She is the deepest desires that pulsate through your body, through your veins, right down into your loins. You know that word, your loins, your womb space, down into your uterus, into your yoni. She is the blood that courses through your body. She is your womb that sheds itself monthly. She is the part of you that wants to howl to the moon and get ugly, the part of you that wants to smear mud on your face and just throw the good girl archetype out into the trash, right? I often say the good girl archetype withers and dies in the presence of wild women. Like, we are so conditioned to be the good girl. And she's definitely not one of the archetypes that I've included in this ritual, because the more we can move away from that restrictive, corset bound, neat, legs crossed, never swearing, never saying anything bad, never saying anything shameful, virgin archetype, the better. That is definitely not an archetype that we wish to call on or encourage. We are here to bring out our inner lioness, our inner wolf, right? So it's time to hear you roar. Yeah, primal noises, the parts of us that are smelly and hairy and juicy and all of the bits of ourselves that we're so conditioned to be ashamed of, right? It's like wild woman doesn't care about any of that. She dances her desires into existence, and she descends to the depths where she comes face to face with her true soul. And wild woman comes into your life to bring earth-shattering truths and really to cut away everything that doesn't serve your highest good. So if you're in a relationship that you know deep down needs to end and that isn't serving you, or if you're in a job that's sucking your soul, or if you're still saying yes to doing things for your family members when you know that it's draining your energy and that you'd rather say no, or you're still accepting people speaking to you in a way that's not appropriate, or you are still being really irresponsible with your money when you really feel the call to get into integrity, but you just can't help yourself. The wild woman is going to shine a light on all of those things and more, because she knows your potential and your deepest truth, and she settles for nothing less. So this is a beautiful mirror work dancing ritual to help you get in touch with the instinctual self. I love that archetype. And I feel like personally, I've only just scratched the surface of that archetype. I think it's hard to even get into that archetype fully in our modern world. I almost feel like you need to get out into nature and to a place where there is no judgment, where you can literally dance and howl around a campfire, you know, but you can find ways to bring in wild women into your day-to-day life, you know, dancing, speaking your truth, embracing your cycle, looking at your period blood if you have a period, and getting to know it, touching it, smelling it, letting yourself be ugly, letting yourself be vulnerable and be seen. You know, wild woman is here to be raw and visceral, and that part of you is that it's there deep within. Loves, this brings us to our final archetype to explore today, and that is the queen within you. So you've got all these archetypes within you, may resonate with some more than others, but I would put money on the fact that you will recognize and relate to having a queen somewhere. It might be somewhere deep within, and even if you don't feel like she's there somewhere, I'm sure, like I said, I would put money on the idea that if you're listening to this podcast, then there's a part of you that desires to step into the queen archetype, you know, because our journeys through life, they have twists, they have turns, they have moments where we're more wise women, they have moments where we're more wild women, they definitely have lots of moments where we're being the good girl, moments where we need to embody our inner child. But through all of those twists and turns, the North Star for us as women has to be absolute, unapologetic, unequivocal sovereignty. Calling all of our parts back to their rightful place and ascending to the throne within our heart. That is really what this journey is about. Calling all the parts of ourselves that we've dismembered and that we've repressed and that we've suppressed and gotten rid of and forgotten about and allowed to fall by the wayside. It's about calling each one of those parts back, putting them back to their rightful place in our bodies, and ascending and rising as the true queen that we are. Assuming absolute authority over our lives, opening up, letting life serve us. Making sure that we are an embodiment of sovereignty in our life, in our choices, in our relationships, in our work. And it means living and breathing and acting from a cracked open and humble and vulnerable heart, but with no compromise on strength, on impact, or on power. And so as you embody the queen, as you start to release your attachments to everything and know that you are self-sourcing and that you are sovereign, once you release your attachments to everything, you start to attract everything, and with ease, and with grace, and with flow. Loves, there we go. We have moved through 8 in total, actually. Beautiful, interesting, impactful, tender, loving, and healing feminine archetypes for us to dive into, to align with, to embody, to acknowledge, to act as guiding lights and north stars as we travel along this journey through life. So I'm going to complete this episode there, but I just wanted to remind you once more that if this has resonated with you and you desire to embody these archetypes and to move and breathe and feel them into being rather than just listen or read about them, which really isn't going to change you on a cellular level. You'll know more, you'll be able to talk about them more, but really all of these episodes are always an invitation for future embodiment, right? This is what I have learned on my journey, and this is what I'm so passionate about doing. There was a time where I would learn about something or read about something, and I would think I was an expert in it straight away before I'd actually embodied and integrated it and really allowed it to become the way that I move through the world. I was skipping that section and doing what a lot of us are conditioned to do, which is like learn something, memorize it, recite it, get an A star, or get an A. And that's such a masculine way of approaching knowledge. And it's not giving or leaving room for the feminine, which is all of this from the neck down. We can't forget about our body. So important that we take what we're learning and that we actually take the time to integrate and embody it before we move on. And certainly before we teach about it and share about it. We have to be in integrity, loves. We have to be in integrity. Okay, my queens, I hope that this episode has landed in your system in a way that has been perhaps surprising, perhaps interesting, definitely juicy, and as always, healing, nurturing, and transformational. I would love to hear your feedback, so feel free to DM me. If you share anything about this episode or listening to this podcast on Instagram, please tag me so that I can repost it and love up on you. And please do take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so that you're always notified when a new episode comes out. They come out every single Wednesday, and I would love, love, love to see lots of you subscribing. And if you do one thing today, if you do one small action, take this podcast episode, send it to a friend. Send it to someone who you think would find this interesting, someone who you think is open to learning about themselves, about life, about the feminine, about energy, about archetypes, someone who you think needs to hear this. Spread the word and help us to bring more women onto this quest of reclaiming our sovereignty and embodying and rising as the goddesses that we truly are. All right, heroines, I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now. Love you.